what is your presence and how do you naturally show up? And mastery of the coach is not about just amplifying your superpower. In fact, it's about growing your range in all of these different areas. Hi, I'm Jennifer Britton, and welcome to the Coaching Money Podcast. I've been on a mission for the last 20 years to expand the coaching conversation to many. Along with my co-host, Evana Valle, we're going to be exploring coaching as it relates to conversations, connection, and change in both personal and professional settings. Coaching Money is about creating empowering and thought-provoking spaces for conversation which strengthen relationships and enhance results. Throughout the Coaching Money podcast, we'll share tools, practices, and approaches to support you in your conversations, one dialogue at a time. Hey, Evana, how you doing today? I'm looking forward to our conversation in this second episode of the Coaching Money podcast.
I'm doing great, Jen. I'm so thrilled to be here and having this important conversation today with you.
Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation because we're going back to the core elements of what coaching is and what coaching is not. Today's episode is all about the 4 elements of coaching many. And what you're going to notice is this is the foundation of coaching anyone, whether you're working one-on-one, with groups, with teams, and or even peer coaching. And that's part of our commitment here. You know, we've been training group and team coaches for almost 20 years now at Potentials Realized. And what is a big part of the work that I do and love is really helping coaches understand that coaching is coaching, right? And I know that's something that you reinforce in our group coaching essentials training. So yeah, when you think about the 4 cornerstones, as we call it, of coaching, what comes to mind for you?
Immediately is to build on what you're saying. It's the foundation. Like everything is built from these 4 elements. So it's nothing new. And yet it's really powerful reinforcement and in my language, grounding to really create and have those powerful conversations that we're all committed to as coaches. We're not in this just to have a light conversation, right? This is really a little bit of what coaching is and what coaching isn't. Like what makes us unique, what keeps us in our lane is those deeper water conversations. And some of these elements really kind of bring presence to that. That's what comes to my mind is like, this is the starting point. And this is one of the distinguishing marks of what is coaching and what coaching isn't.
Yeah.
What about you, Jen?
I love that. I think, one of our principles in coaching many is keep it simple. And that means we need to go down to the basics, which is why we're starting here in episode 2. And so let's talk about what those 4 are, because I'm sure there are people who are chomping at the bit wondering, well, you keep talking about these 4. So here's the context, right? 2009, ICF went out and did one of their regular global coaching client surveys. And they do these roughly every 2 to 3 years. And they ask different questions. 2009, the question was, what makes coaching distinct from other modalities? And I've been talking about this now for, 15 years. And really, I think as we share these 4 elements, think about how they're using them in any conversation. As Evana said, these are the differentiators. These help us ensure that, yes, I am in my lane and my box of coaching. And so the 4 are we working around goals? Are we focusing on not only action, but also awareness? So in my writing, from one to many, you'll really hear me talk about the XY axes of coaching. Even in reconnecting workspaces, my latest body of work, it's really about we want to support our clients in coaching towards movement, but we also need to slow it down. We need to look at that 360 view of what awareness is. And I know that's a big part of your work. So after I mentioned the 4th element, I want us to actually jump right into awareness, which I think in 2024 is one of our most important areas that we can really be leading from. So the 4th element, if you're really wanting to note that down, is of course accountability. And coaching, as I wrote in From One to Many, coaching is a conversation with intent. And that means that we are making a commitment, whether that commitment is on a team level, whether I'm making a commitment to my peer group, or whether I'm making a commitment to myself. What am I going to do before we come back together? Or what am I going to be before we come back together? So we really want to anchor this notion of, coaching is not just about doing more, doing it differently. It really is about activating that awareness. So I know this is your area of specialty, and this is really your super strength, Ivana. Let's get you to talk a little bit. We'll start with awareness. Like, what does it mean to coach for awareness? What comes to mind for you?
Oh, there's so much richness. I have to say, when I started off as a coach, this was actually my biggest area of growth. And not only as a coach, but also as a human being. I was a mover and a shaker. And so it really took something for me to slow down. Like awareness is that reflection, is that moment of creating pause. So when I think about awareness, I think of it also not only for our participants in our group programs or individually or our teams, but also how are we doing that ourselves in preparation or in service to our, conversations of many? Yeah. All four of these elements really is, to me, it's a layer of my self-awareness in how I'm showing up for the conversation, as much as supporting my participants in their awareness. Because a lot of participants, especially in organizations, or it's probably more than organizations, personalities, right? Some people like thrive, they're movers and shakers. And yet they find themselves on that hamster wheel and wondering why they don't have that joy, why they don't have that happiness, why they don't have that satisfaction, because they're just on autopilot. They're just going, going, going. And so as a coach, I think it's fundamental that we actually create the space to allow our participants, our clients, to have awareness. So they're actually more empowered. And we've learned the tools in our initial training, but it's about, even if I can bring in the competencies, may I, Jen?
Just please, yeah, let's talk about them.
We have a whole competency, right? I think it's number 5, if I'm not mistaken, evoke awareness.
Number 7.
There's a whole competency, thank you, is about evoking awareness. So that intuition, right? That all that piece, how are we allowing, what are the things we're doing? It could be powerful questions, but even awareness, a big part of my work when it comes to the awareness is helping my clients to connect to their body, using somatics as a means to access deeper wisdom. When I think of, even, it's like a lot of people are so head busy, but there's as much wisdom in our heart as it is in our body and in our gut. And so for me, part of awareness is allowing people and creating the space and the conversation for that deeper knowledge to make then, more empowering, more impactful choices to take action that's actually going to support them in what they want.
I love that.
What are your thoughts on action, Jen?
Well, action is if we think of where we are in 2024, we have such an epidemic of burnout now. I was just put this on LinkedIn, here in Canada, 42% of professionals right now are saying that they're experiencing some level of burnout. And I think it's because we've spent the last 4 years, especially since early 2020, in this hyper environment of action and results. If we are just burning it on that, we can't, from a performance level, we can't renew, we can't recharge. And that's where that 360 of yes, coaching is not only about doing things faster, better, differently, it's also about slamming on the brakes in some instances, especially when we work with type A people like myself, to say, whoa, let's slow it down. What are the values you're leading from? Yeah. What are the assumptions you're making? What mindset are you in? And we are really seeing on so many different layers the research that is showing, even in business success, it's not just what you're doing, it's your mindset. How are you showing up? How are you moving through the challenges that, if we look out in the external world, there's a lot of things going on, yet how do we retain that focus? So I think, if anything, in today's world of coaching, how are coaches themselves, especially in working in the variety of rooms, physically, virtually, hybrid, how are we coaching the many on this invisible layer often of awareness because in a group, you're going to have everyone with a different mindset, even around a similar goal. You're going to have multiple goals. And so this is where going back to the principle of keeping it simple, simplify, back to basics. We want to really dial in, what are we doing in each coaching touch point with a group or a team to really help people evoke that awareness, competency 7. Yes, we want to get to the goal setting. Yes, we want to talk about what are you going to do now. That is also important, but what work are we doing below the waterline? And if you're familiar with reconnecting workspaces, effective virtual conversations, I introduce the iceberg, right? Because in my work as a team coach, it's very easy, it's very seductive even to be focusing just on the team's results. Well, let's help that team really reverse engineer. What are the behaviors that are leading to those results? And more importantly, not from the behavioral level, but what are those things below the waterline, the iceberg of the waterline, the mindsets, the values, the assumptions, the perspectives, the habits even that are leading to the behaviors, because that's where the transformational change happens, right? It's not about, let's tweak this result. We got to get below the waterline. And to something you said, Evana, right? Like, what is coaching and how is it different than other related disciplines? As many of you know, I've been working in the team development range sphere since 1988. That's a long time. In fact, this past weekend, I returned to where I started as a leader. I got to see some of the women on my team, and they said, Jen, you're the same. Oh, which is really a compliment. 35, 40 years later to hear that I am still the same. And, I think it's because as a young leader, I really was encouraged to lead from values, to lead from who I am, what my stand is. And that's what we need to do with teams. We need to help teams really look at their skeleton, not all the fancy bells and whistles that can happen, but what's at that core? What's at the foundation? And that's why we wanted to do this second episode here of the 4 elements or the 4 cornerstones, because there are a lot of things that we could be doing as a group or team coach, but we've got to dial it in at the foundational level. So I've taken it a bit wider, as I
want to add something, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I want to just add in something is in terms of as a coach, you said like, this is your thing. This is my strength. Absolutely. And so for those coaches who see this, for the people who have integrated other practices, holistic practices like mindfulness, right? Like meditations, like my invitation is, whether this is your strength, take an inventory of what you already have in your toolbox to build from, like in this. But for those of who are stronger in results, right? Like the Jennifers of the world, right? Which that's been my growth edge. Like what from that standpoint, we also have to look at like growing our range as a coach. Just because I am strong in awareness, it doesn't mean that these other cornerstones become irrelevant. They're all absolutely powerful. And I love that access. And I'm glad you brought up the iceberg, because it's all these things. And I think what I'm really being called to share is like, this is where we have to look at ourselves in our own growth, which is back to a competency, right? How are we growing? Think about these 4 elements. Where is your strength, but also where is your stretch? Where is your growth? You know, this is part of the conversation we're having here.
And it's a conversation we've been involved in for many, many years, as you know.
Absolutely.
And I think many of you have heard me talk about this in the last 3 years, the superpowers, right? What is your presence and how do you naturally show up? And mastery of the coach is not about just amplifying your superpower. In fact, it's about growing your range in all of these different areas. So Evana has strengths as a grounded labyrinth coach. Those of you that work really in the mindfulness sphere, you bring this. This has been my growth edge for the last 2 or 3 years. And in working with teams right now, what is it that teams really need? Here's what I've been hearing in the last few months. It is not about how do we go faster. It is about how do we resource ourselves? How do we really dig deep into who we are in the fabric of our being, not doing. And so, again, how do we grow as we continue our journey as coaches? And that means getting out of our comfort zone. It means continuing to stretch. So there's some really interesting sort of systemic layers here of how are we approaching our work? What are we seeing that our clients need? And does that have a reflection, or is there a connection with what we actually need to be looking at as well? And so for those of you that are systemic coaches and label yourself as such, this is at the heart of what we do as systems-based workers. And so we'll be dedicating further conversations on this. But as a coaching supervisor, and I would say as a critical educator, I grew up in my younger years as a grad student embracing Peter Senge's work. It was so deep into my being that I never labeled myself as a systemic practitioner, but it's just part and parcel. So that's another layer of this. What I'd love for us to do, because we could continue talking on awareness, but let's talk a little bit about goals and accountability, because I think, goals and accountability, there are many coaching models in the one-on-one sphere where say, oh, it's not important to coach to goals. But I would argue, and this is a pretty strong argument, that in a group setting, it's so critical that we do work with people on helping them articulate what their goals are, what their unique coaching journey is, even though they're coming together on a regular basis with their peers. So, what do you want to say around goals and how important that is for a group coaching conversation, Evana?
Yeah, goals are fundamental. And I think when we think about it, whether it be one-on-one, but in the conversation of many, we have to remember that the goals are the client's goals, the participant's goals, not the coach's goals. And so what brings some layer of, I'm going to call it challenge and adventure, because I love the challenge and adventure of it, is acknowledging that each participant is going to have their own set of goals. And the role of the coach is to support that individual journey's path in fulfilling their goals. So in our programs, we talk about structures and tools to support a coach to do that, because there are tools, there are structures that can support that. The other thing I want to talk about goals is it's not something that you bring up at the start and then it's something that it's kind of like part of the thread line, I'm going to say, in that coaching conversation. And again, how are you ensuring that it's part of what I say oftentimes, even in our group coaching essentials, is my goal or my success is if you fulfill your goals, not my goals. It's that each individual participant in a group coaching program, even in our training for that matter, fulfills their program goals, because that kind of does help the kind of the compass of and the baseline of where we're going in this journey. And if they don't have goals, just like if you don't have goals in life, you're kind of lost. So you need to have some idea of what you want to get out of this journey, as I call them, because I take them as journeys. But what are your goals? What are your objectives? And again, the ICF competency speaks to this so strongly, like in terms of even the co-creating the agreement, it identifies it. The group identifies what they want to accomplish, right? And even I'm going to go to number 8, facilitating client growth. Even there, it explicitly says the client's autonomy in the design of goals, and furthermore, action and accountability. So this is more of a presencing and a reminder of a lot of newer group coaches, and even I think it's worthy of seasoned coaches, is to remember when to keep things simple, as we said at the start, is goal setting is really about your participants' goals, not your goals for the group. They are owning that process. And we are here to create that conversation, a container.
Yeah. And again, a differentiator. If I'm a facilitator, it's my goals as a facilitator for this group. If I'm a coach, it really is helping each individual mine and articulate what is their pathway, where are they wanting to go in the time that we have together, and then being able to share that with their peers, which is very different than in a team coaching. So some of you might be listening going, but wait, the work that I do with many is with teams, and we're trying to work on one goal. And yes, this is why we need to be really clear and even work with our clients in contracting. Like, what is the purpose here? Are we building individual capability? Because maybe this is a group, not a team of new leaders, or are we working with one team that have shared goals, shared vision, and are working towards a collectively shared important goal, where our work as coaches, as a team coach, is often, not always, but often about alignment and helping each individual team member really align across those collective goals so that they can achieve the results that they need to achieve. Now, if you've read Reconnecting Workspaces, you're going to be very familiar with my languaging around coaching is not only about results, it's also about relationships. And this is where, if we're only focusing on goals, we're missing a huge piece of the work that we do, which is relational. And again, if we look at the context, 2024, people are hungry for that connection, for the sense of belonging, for the sense of having greater purpose and being part of something that is bigger than themselves. So as a coach, yes, we want to focus on goals, but we need to make sure that it's not at the expense of the awareness piece, which really taps to relationships and understanding who we are and what's possible when we harness the best of each other. So really, again, going back to the 4 cornerstones of action, awareness, goals, accountability, the other piece that we haven't even touched on yet is accountability. And, accountability is going to look different for you than me, even at an individual level. But then if we're in a group together, we're going to want to make sure that we're also celebrating how we each want to be held accountable. For, me, yes, my DNA, I am still wired the same way. My friends could see that from the young age of my teenage years. Jen, you always get things done. Like you have so much on the go, but you're still getting it done and you're still having fun. How is that possible? Because that's the way I am. And so again, like accountability for me, it's less about I need to be accountable to someone else. It's hardwired in me. And if I wake up in the morning and say I haven't done it, I'll probably get up half an hour earlier just to get it done because it's important. It's just the way I'm wired. That's probably really different than for you. So Ivana, if you feel comfortable sharing, like when you think of accountability for you and your goals, what helps you thrive in the accountability?
My coach.
Sphere? Your coach. There you go.
My coach is actually multiple coaches, right? Absolutely. And what's powerful and it works for me is like ultimately I share, just like I ask, what support can I offer you to support you fulfilling this action, whatever that is, always. And I think it's really important to say this, and I say this with my coaching clients, especially in the newer ones, like I'm your mirror, right? And so oftentimes I have to champion them to what their action is. And we've all learned different coaching skills, like the challenge. I did this in a group coaching program yesterday. Someone who's really wanting to develop their English because it's fundamental in their job success as a leader. And he was traveling and I'm like, okay. So he's like, I want to practice English when I'm in Frankfurt this week. I'm like, great. So how many conversations are you having? And what can we do as a group to support your success? It's not me telling him what he has to do. Again, this is a shift, right? It's not a big shift, but depending on where you are in your spectrum and growth, it was a big shift for me because I thought I had to know and had to tell them what they had to do. And it's not our role. Our role is to support that container so they can go and fulfill their goals in the way that they need support and accountability. And you're absolutely right. It's individual. And in group coaching, it really comes to the surface. And so our role is to use that awareness. Our role is to understand what their goals are, but to empower them and support them in making those steps, whatever that looks like for each and every individual person. And that can be a challenge for coaches.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I love that. And again, I think what you just said, I want to spotlight it because in a group coaching, everyone is on their unique path. And I think one of the tricky issues that emerges, and coaches feel different in addressing this, but how do you help people recognize that it's okay to be different? In fact, you are each on your unique path. Each one of you wants a different type of accountability. You're going to be asking for different accountability. And that can activate, especially across cultures, a lot of different layers. And so, just notice, I think we'll come back to accountability in future calls, but in a group coaching, this is a really critical part. Team coaching, again, very different. And I think we need to tease out these differences because a lot of coaches right now are conflating the skill set. I'm a team coach. I need to make sure everyone's on the same page. Yes, in a team. And for teams today, accountability is critical, but you may get the eye rolls, right? You may really have that toxic behavior of, oh, there she goes again, like accountability. And accountability can look very, very different, but are people also taking responsibility for what they have said they're going to get done? And I think, again, organization to organization, team to team, there is a really important conversation that we need to have, or spark, really, it's a conversation the team needs to have around what does accountability mean for them? How are they going to hold themselves accountable? What are they committed to no matter what? Because the no matter whats are happening every moment for teams today. And do they have each other's backs? Or is this just a lip service? It's just an activity. You know, in my work, and going back 20 years, like our team commitments were life or death in some instances.
Yeah.
And so did I know that someone in my team had my back, no matter thick or thin. And that's what I bring as a coach. So when I go into organizations and I say accountability and I see the eye rolls, I open that Pandora's box and people aren't happy with it. But I then share sort of my own experience with teams where, again, back to the teams that I led, we were waterfront teams. Our ability to work together as a team meant life or death, right? Either a person drowned or they didn't. And that's a life or death from a very young age. But if we don't dial it in, then what's the point? So.
Yeah, I want to add something to this because I think it's, again, I'm always wearing different hats. And so the hat as a coach is, I think we have a responsibility to be okay with ourselves and to honor everyone in their individual journey. And in the work that I do with women who are in transition, it often becomes a topic of paralyzing, not accountability, but that whole comparison. If we feel that everyone has to move at the same pace, it can be paralyzing. So oftentimes in my own group coaching programs, in my coaching conversations, there is that, like, the paralyzing of comparison. And so as a coach, it's our responsibility to have that self-awareness of our tendency. And that's where we build our range. And that's where our growth as a human, let alone a coach, has to come, because we're here in service of their goals and their success.
Yeah, really well said. And again, I hope what our listeners are picking up on is just the diversity of what our conversations can look like. And that's one reason why Evana and I, who are two very different coaches, we work with different people, different areas. We wanted to bring to you as listeners, like, the range. Mastery is the range. It's not about dialing down into one model, one thing, because we live in a diverse world in diverse times. And so the more you can do to equip your range and expand your range, you're going to be in greatest service to clients. Now, one of the things we're aware of is appetite. How much time do we have? And so as we come to sort of a close, I think I also want to spotlight a couple of core other elements. Again, we've got our 4 cornerstones: the action, the awareness, the goals, and the accountability. Throughout today's conversation, you've also heard these 2 other anchors, and very much in the work and my body of work with reconnecting workspaces, it's about how are we helping people get results individually, collectively, whether it's group coaching, team coaching, but also how are they building that relational fabric and really spending time deepening relationships. Part of the hue and cry to get people back into the office has been, let's collaborate, let's do it, let's build relationships. So this is the opportunity to be doing that more formally. But one of the other greatest gifts that's going to be a nice segue into our next conversation is one of the most important layers, which has been in the backdrop of this whole conversation, is, of course, connection. And that's what makes group and team coaching different. It's really about expanding the layers of connection that we're working around. We're not only just working on ourselves and our own personal connection to a topic. I'm now working on my peer relationships. I'm thinking about, how do I need to adjust my style to work more effectively with others? What considerations do I need to keep in mind? How can I have each other's backs? So we are, in our next episode, going to be dialing into another related foundation of this work, which is the triad of trust, safety, and connection. And I would assert that in our work, it is the connection piece that really makes the difference in what we do and what impact we have as coaches with our clients in helping them think about what does connection mean in all its different layers. So over to you, connection. How do you see connection in this whole landscape of coaching money?
Well, I know we're going to be talking about it next episode, but again, I see connection to be a subset of relationships. And so from a coaching many conversation, connection is really around how are we supporting, again, that earlier conversation of that individual journey from a group coaching standpoint. I'll let you cover the team coaching because that's both are your lanes of specialty, but it's not so much mine. So it is that individual journey, but also how are we having people feel like they're actually not alone in this journey? Because in group coaching, they're often coming over a theme, like there's a thematic topic that is bringing them together. And so, sometimes in that journey of self-discovery in your goals, you're going to come into challenges. And so part of that connection is how do we support the coaching many container to actually feel like they're connected so that they can relate to one another, that they have, I'm going to use peer support or colleague support. So when things do get challenging, when things are meant to be celebrated, there's a community, a connection to do that. And I think that's a big part of a fundamental piece of the coaching many conversation, or even let's take it outside of, if I'm thinking about a family at a table, the connection of the table, what does that look like as a family unit, as a church community? What are those things, and how do we foster connection? How do we develop? How do we allow? And I'm going to say this is pretty brass and sassy. In the coaching menu, this is not about you as the coach. So how do we support that connection, that conversation, that it doesn't revolve around you? Because I'm sorry, it's not about you as the coach. It's about the people in your conversation. And so how do we support that? And I know we do a great job, and I'm going to say this, in some of our programs, including Group Coaching Essentials, to really support our upcoming group coaches to understand the importance of that connection. And what are those structures? What are those pieces to really support that? So that way, as you mentioned earlier, those tricky issues become blips. So we can really create an empowering conversation and transformation.
Group and team coaching is all about creating community on massive scale. And community is where a lot of online learners are like, oh, now we need to build community. Well, community has always been at the hub of this work. We cannot actually have a coaching conversation if we do not feel connected. We can't get to those deeper layers of the assumptions and the mindsets of these transformational areas that are at the heart of a coach's work, and yet at the landscape side of many other related disciplines. So we wanted to sort of bring that in while we talk mostly about these four cornerstones in coaching many. We want to make sure we're working and helping people think about their results and their relationships in this bigger wrapper of connection to self, connection to others, connection to even head, heart, gut, spirit. This is an integrative sort of workspace. And as coaches, invitation, it's not just great to show up and listen to something. We actually want to walk our talk. And at the end of every episode, we want to give you some field work that you can be a choice. You could say yes, you could say no, and of course you could say maybe. So that's the going back to foundations, but invitation for you to really be thinking about what are your primary strengths right now, and what can you be doing in your work and in your own personal development as a coach to think about how do you ensure that you've got these four anchoring elements: action, awareness, accountability, and goals. What are you doing to work with results and relationships? And finally, what are you doing to foster more connection? As you heard from Evana, our next episode is going to be one of my favorites. It really is the defining piece of my work and the Reconnecting Workspaces model, the triad that I first introduced way back in 2017 with effective virtual conversations. And it is a triad. So more on that next coming up. Evana, as we go to wrap up, any final comments or any inquiries that you'd like to leave people with?
For me, it's like these four elements are really just enmeshed in the core competency. So this is nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
It really is just a core part of what we are already doing in our coaching conversations. And maybe it's a light bulb moment to go, hold on, I need to go back and look at these competencies. I need to actually bring more intentionality to these 4 elements. So my invitation, building off what you said, is just really kind of do a self-evaluation of these 4 and where can you have greater impact? Because I think coaching is really, we're in this to have an impact, to make a difference. So within these 4 elements, again, nothing new, and an opportunity to double down and have some impact. Further your impact, further your range, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Further your range by doubling down on the basics, back to basics. Well, with that, really enjoyed our second conversation. You can find us at thecoachingmenipodcast.com. Certainly subscribe, follow, whether you're watching us on YouTube at the Effective Group Coach channel. You've got the playlist here for Coaching Many podcast. Check us out, groupcoachingessentials.ca. We offer a range of ICF CCE approved programs for new and very seasoned group and team coaches, because we know that the learning journey, the evolution of the group and team coach doesn't just end with the essentials. It continues for years and years and years. So Evana, as always, such a pleasure to really spend time talking about what we love to do, what we love to equip others in doing. Thank you for your continued interest, leaning in, focus. And yeah, until we see each other again, be well.
Ciao.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.